And thanks to all of you for joining us today for this webinar session. And my name is Michele Pelino, and I've been working at Forrester for over 8 years now. Prior to joining Forrester, I was in the telecommunications industry for many years as a management consultant with one of the big 5 firms, and I worked with many of the communication service providers throughout the world to help them deploy new types of wireless and wireline services. But within Forrester, the focus of my research agenda is identifying trends and adoption drivers for enterprise mobility solutions. And increasingly, the concept of what mobility is for enterprises is extending beyond the smartphone and tablet environment that many of us are familiar with to include connecting objects, items, and assets using machine-to-machine and Internet of Things solutions. And these IoT solutions and the machine-to-machine technologies that enable them are certainly not new, and not new indeed in the manufacturing arena. And they've been in existence for many years. However, we're seeing increasing corporate interest and momentum in deployment of these IoT solutions, as well as a broad array of solutions providers and vendors who are working to help these end-user organizations deploy solutions to capture benefits of deploying IoT initiatives. So today I'm going to be facilitating an interactive discussion that's going to focus specifically on identifying opportunities and momentum for deploying Internet of Things solutions in the manufacturing arena. During the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we mean by the concept of Internet of Things, or what we term the connected world at Forrester, as well as provide some insight and overview in terms of whether manufacturing firms are deploying these solutions on the factory floor, and provide some insight into some of the applications and services that they're using. I'm joined today by executives from Cisco and from AeroScout Industrial who are going to talk with me during this interactive discussion, providing various use cases and examples of what's really happening out there in the real world. And at the end of the session, there's going to be time for audience questions. So as we heard earlier, please do submit your questions so that we can take them at the end of the presentation. So with that overview, let's start with some introductions of my colleagues who are on the presentation today. Chet, would you do a brief introduction?
Sure thing. Thanks, Michele. My name is Chet Namboodri, and as the director for our global manufacturing industry practice, I lead Cisco's marketing strategy and business development execution to really drive outcome-focused solutions, that is, integrated products and services, to drive growth within our customers' lines of business, particularly focused on engineering and production operations. We work with an ecosystem of leading manufacturing industry partners to transform new business models for growth, for innovation, agility, and efficiency for those industrial clients.
Thanks so much, Chet. And now I'd like Priya to talk a little bit about her background.
And marketing for AeroScout Industrial. That's part of Stanley Black & Decker, which is an S&P 500 company. So I joined AeroScout Industrial around the time of acquisition back in June 2012. And my responsibility is really setting the solution and the product roadmap for where we are headed with this location and condition-based solutions that we offer, the connected asset solutions that we offer in this industrial space. In addition to that, for the last 10 years or so, I actually started my career in manufacturing. So I've worked in the commercial engine MRO space at Pratt & Whitney, followed by the renewable energy business at GE Energy. So quite familiar with some of the predicaments that we encounter in the operational and the product development space in this industrial sector. And I think it definitely sheds a different perspective on what the connected asset solutions can bring into this space.
Thanks so much, Priya. So before we get too much into the discussion today with the panelists, I wanted to talk a little about the overall theme for today's session. So it probably comes as no surprise to many of you who are listening to this, but the reality is that manufacturing firms are facing an increasingly competitive environment that requires innovative technology and solutions to help improve production efficiency and distribution processes. And successful manufacturing firms must continue to evolve and improve their operational production and distribution efficiency while also remaining agile to address the needs of their business users and their workers. Achieving these benefits often requires Internet of Things solutions and various types of wireless and wireline infrastructure to help these organizations enhance their agility, to help them anticipate supply chain shifts in demand, and to address the competitive market environment. And so one thing that I thought would be important to talk about before we get too far into the discussion is to say, what do we really mean when we say the Internet of Things? There isn't a standard definition of what the Internet of Things is, and you hear the term used from various different perspectives. So I thought I would put some context to that definition as we see it at Forrester Research. And at Forrester, we defined the Internet of Things, or what we call the connected world, as sensors and information technologies that enable objects and infrastructure to interact with monitoring, analytic, and control systems over Internet networks. And these combined elements create a platform for awareness, analysis, and action for organizations. IoT solutions use machine-to-machine devices, these networks and analytic capabilities to connect physical objects and products to the computing systems. And in this world, the smartphone is interesting because it's used as a controller or a hub for monitoring and interacting with other things in the environment. So it's a very important piece of the Internet of Things ecosystem. There's three different ways that firms can leverage IoT solutions to improve their business results. Initially, we see momentum in IoT solutions that are focused on asset optimization or helping firms use physical, human, or even financial assets more efficiently. In manufacturing firms, they can save money by extending the life of equipment, improving the utilization of machinery, or monitoring assets to more effectively run, maintain, or upgrade the equipment or assets used in the supply chain process. Secondly, we're seeing momentum among manufacturers to differentiate their products, and this includes incorporating connectivity elements into products, particularly in a variety of different industry sectors and manufacturing arenas. We see it often in the industrial equipment arena, commercial equipment, and consumer products more and more so. This connectivity is being incorporated into those products and even into hospital equipment as well. And finally, the third way that we're seeing firms deploy IoT solutions is to transform their customer relationships. And these firms are using connected products to create ongoing relationships with their customers instead of just selling them an individual product. They're transforming, as I mentioned, the products themselves by incorporating connectivity into them and changing the way that they develop those products in the future by understanding how individuals are using their existing products and how there might be challenges or issues that come up with those products, taking that information and using that in real time to change the way that they're developing product as well. So these are three key ways that we see the transformation that's possible using Internet of Things solutions. I think it's also important to understand what are the elements of these IoT, or as we call them, connected world solutions, and how do you get this to be operational in an organization? And there's four key elements that need to be thought through. First, there's the awareness element. And this component is tied to the machine-to-machine technologies, the RFID tags, the sensors, the video cameras, the GPS chips, smart cards, other types of technology that's capturing the status and the condition and the presence of assets or people in a process. And then wireless networks transport the data that's captured from those individual assets to use for the analytic process. In the analytic process, you see business intelligence and analytic software such as data mining and predictive analytics, video image analysis, pattern recognition, different types of algorithms that are used to really determine whether a business should act on or change or do something different or ignore a pattern. So this type of information is very important. And based on that information, you see that there are various alternatives that are put into place to decide whether a specific action should be taken or not. And finally, in some industries, there's a requirement to track all the steps in the process due to compliance regulations or government or corporate regulations or policies. And this auditing requirement is also part of this process, and you can capture what's going on and provides an ability to monitor activities and learn how to complete these activities more efficiently and more effectively in the future. So I just kind of laid out the structure for what we see as the key elements of IoT solutions, and I thought I would ask Chet, given the various different organizations that you've worked with, you know, how important are some of these elements? One of the areas we hear a lot about is the analytics piece, and I'm curious if that's an important piece of some of the conversations you've had with manufacturing firms.
Absolutely it is. And, you know, what's interesting to me in how you've laid this out is it looks like a control loop. And I actually started my career out as an advanced manufacturing engineer and controls engineer with GE. And so looking at kind of the IoT capabilities that are enabled alongside the analysis with, you know, a subsequent action loop is an interesting, very, very interesting way to look at it. IoT is really at the sensor level, it's kind of at the device level, mostly about creating more awareness. But that awareness is driving a lot of information flows. And those information flows are what, through analytics, you know, through the analysis, is what's enabling new business models and really more efficient, more productive capabilities within a company's operations. So I'll talk a little more about some examples, but I see what we've seen is that with IoT and consequent analytics really making sense of all of these information flows that are coming out of IoT devices is one area is really driving, as you've termed it, the connected product, which is enabling upside service revenues for many manufacturing product companies. And then also, of course, with more sensors and more awareness of what's happening within an operation in the context of the marketplace, companies are better able to really optimize their business models around satisfying customers' needs in a much more agile and efficient way. Control loop is great. Very, very interesting way to look at it.
Great. Thanks so much, Chet. So I thought maybe before we got too far into some of the details and use cases, I'd give some context around some of the results that we have from our surveys. And Forrester does field a variety of different surveys throughout the year to help us better understand the technology and IT priorities of organizations across global organizations. This survey was fielded to global business and technology decision makers in 9 countries throughout the world. And what I did is, for this question, what are your firm's plans to adopt M2M or Internet of Things solutions or applications? I looked at 2 categories of sort of manufacturing organizations, high-tech manufacturing and other types of manufacturing, other kinds of durable goods and pharmaceuticals is in that second category. Just to get a sense of the timelines for current deployment and planned deployments for these IoT solutions. And you see in the top bar category that for high-tech manufacturing firms, 26% of those firms say that they have implemented, are expanding implementation, or are piloting these IoT solutions today. Another 33% of those high-tech manufacturers have plans to deploy IoT solutions within the next year or 2. So there's certainly a fair amount of momentum there. And you see with the other types of manufacturers who are not necessarily deploying high-tech products and services, but ultimately 15% say that they're piloting, implementing, or expanding IoT implementation. And another 27% are deploying or planning to deploy those in the next couple of years. So this is just one way of looking at sort of the way to segment the manufacturing organizations out there. I think there are many different ways to do that. And I thought maybe, I know, Chet, you work with their amount of manufacturers. How do you guys look at the sort of segmentation of opportunities for manufacturers to deploy these solutions?
Right. In terms of, you know, kind of the segmentation, there's really certain business outcomes that manufacturers are looking for, whether it's kind of optimizing their business model against new services that they can create through the connected product. That's one kind of segment area where IoT and the Internet of Everything is really enabling a product to be more of a service delivery mechanism. So that segment you can consider, of course, automobile manufacturers. A lot of people have heard about the connected car and the opportunity for driverless vehicles. That is, I think, a future segment that is going to gain some steam as we look into the next 5 years. On the other side, in terms of optimizing the operations within the company, adapting the value chain to adapt in real time to changing markets, increasing uptime for OEE and efficiency improvements, utilization, reducing energy consumption and enabling more sustainable operation, and as you mentioned earlier about the traceability and avoiding kind of costly supply chain disruptions from quality issues and recalls. Those operational areas are really driven from a segmentation standpoint in terms of when is the right time to deploy more IoT capabilities around, of course, greenfields, as there are plants that are being, additional capacity that's being introduced within a manufacturing company that is a prime opportunity, of course, expansion in addition to just a brand new plant, new capital equipment for expansion purposes. But also another example within automotive, there's a compelling event around rethinking the IoT, the architecture that's used for collecting information off of the factory floor and utilizing that in a closed-loop control for adaptivity, for reduced costs, and for mitigated risk. In the case of automotive, with each new model introduction, which is anywhere from 5 to 10 years in terms of where you want to make a change to an existing factory, it's really an opportunity. They typically will change out all of the equipment that's used, the automation equipment that's used for producing those vehicles, and so that's a compelling event, again, with the introduction of a new model for considering the deployment of IoT and additional IoT capabilities.
Great. Priya, I was wondering, from the perspective of what you're seeing, I mean, is there a profile of manufacturers, or are there certain factors that are driving momentum right now in the manufacturing arena to move towards these IoT solutions?
Absolutely. I think some of the areas that we see a big growth trend is, industry, the customers who are, in a very significant growth mode, that they're running into capacity constraints. So I joke that it's cheaper to optimize your factory than go build a new one to optimize the throughput. Then, a second arena is the supply chain is getting increasingly complex. So customers where the supply chain is very complex, and if you look at even in the aerospace industry, as more companies get involved in the development of the aircraft, and there's a lot more coordination logistics that has to happen globally, the need for visibility to that supply chain and the impact that it ends up having on your production is quite significant, more so than it was a few decades ago. Then one other area that I think that we're seeing is just customers who are forward thinkers. They're creating workplace of the future, labs of the future, and the connected asset becomes a critical piece of enabling those future workplaces and labs. So, we're getting a combination of customers who are just seeing, constraints in the factory due to significant growth, plus not to forget the flexible manufacturing model that, a lot of factories are seeing where they used to make a single product, now they have to make multiple products, and they need to be able to continue to have that flexible manufacturing without impacting quality or throughput. In conjunction with just, anticipating where this market is headed and, what these solutions can enable. I think those are some of the two key areas that we see a lot of momentum today with our customers.
Great. Thanks so much. So I think the other slide I wanted to put out here for context is that there's a couple of different ways that we see manufacturers actually deploy IoT or connected world initiatives. And we've broken them into two major categories. One is using connected assets and connecting those assets to optimize the utilization and efficiency of certain processes in an organization. So in the manufacturing arena, you would have processes like incorporating sensors into assets throughout the supply chain process, or in the assembly line to monitor what's happening with the equipment, or to enable the inventory management process. And many manufacturers can use these connected assets to optimize the use of resources, as well as not just machines, but also power and electricity and other sorts of equipment. So these connected assets enable processes to be connected. And then the second type of connectivity and solutions we're seeing some manufacturers deploy are actual connected products. And this is when firms incorporate connected electronics and sensors into their products that they're creating. And this can transform not just the product itself, but also the business models. So what we see are, connections being incorporated into medical equipment or into mining equipment, or in the consumer arena, there's a growing array of connected lighting and scales and door locks and bathroom fixtures and anything you can imagine, right? You can incorporate connectivity into many, many different types of devices. The reason you would do that as a manufacturer is to really better understand how that product is being used to transform your relationships with your customers from selling one time a product to an ongoing services or relationship with your customers by understanding when and how they're using that product and potentially providing them with the opportunity to get other types of products or services that are relevant to them. And it can also transform your customer relationship and your product development processes by having information about where and how those products are being used, where those products may be breaking down, to use that to transform how you're creating those products as well. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at the two kind of broad ways manufacturers can incorporate IoT solutions into their daily activities as well as the products themselves. I thought I would ask Chet if he's seeing that sort of opportunity in the different manufacturing organizations that you work with.
Absolutely, and to illustrate those two examples, we have a couple of customer cases that I want to talk about. Again, it's sweating the assets is how I would term the kind of connected asset, and then leveraging your product as a vehicle for more services and for transforming your business model and your customer relationships in the second. In the first case, we have an example where at Harley, they in York, Pennsylvania, they have an assembly shop where they were really faced with shutting down. And the reason for that was the complexity of the 1,200 different configurations that they had to produce was driving quality problems, cycle time problems, stack time, and so on, that were not really keeping up with the marketplace in terms of the demand from customers. And so what's interesting here is they really took the approach of converging the information flows from the enterprise with the information flows that are happening on the factory floor in the controls and automation equipment that's used to produce the motorcycles. And by unifying those over a unified wireless infrastructure along with a unified wired and wireless, I should say, they really created an end-to-end converged plant-wide Ethernet architecture, as we like to call it, that has enabled them to not only be more efficient and really sweat those assets in a better way, but also more flexible, because there's a lot of automated flows from the enterprise side, which is driven really from a pull from the customer in terms of where the demands are and what's needed to be built. That is getting thrown into the factory, into an operator's workstation. One of the other areas that Harley really beefed up their visualization around what's happening within the factory and in terms of customer demand. So at an operator's workstation, they're able to see, what's coming in front of them. They're able to see how their production is moving along relative to to the plan, and they're also even able to get work instructions and safety instructions and a lot of different capabilities through this visualization, through digital media. And so really by combining that unified wired and wireless architecture with visualization to really help empower the operators, they really fundamentally able to drive increased flexibility and reduce costs alongside with that flexibility and agility. And so that's helped to keep York, Pennsylvania open and really humming. The profitability and throughput numbers are double digit in terms of the increase consequent to that converged architecture that they implemented. In the second example is one where it's really leveraging an offer from, in this case, it's Kamal, a company who provides, is a machine builder and line builder for automotive companies in many cases. They were really pulled along by their customer base to provide additional services, engineering services. They're the experts around the plant equipment the lines that they really build out for their automotive and aerospace customers. And so what they found was that their customers were, one, needing a shorter cycle around the design through commissioning of equipment for expansions or for new plants. And they also were asked by their customers to have capability from expertise in Germany, right, and other places from around the world where they could really expand those experts into the factories with services that help to keep the equipment up and running. So again, Kamal chose to take a standardized approach that's converged on Internet Protocol that has enabled significantly reduced times in design because they're using off-the-shelf kind of modular capabilities and components. And they're also able to have a remote, secure connection into that equipment to provide services as needed by their customer base over the life cycle of that equipment. So some of the outcomes that were achieved there with Kamal, they reduced by 2/3 the installation and commissioning and debugging time that's required. In one of the examples, it was a 10-station line that they built out. They reduced the overall machine life cycle total cost of ownership through these additional services and through the shorter design through commissioning by 30%. And they're able to really provide proactive services now by monitoring remotely, again in a secure fashion that's locked down through a converged architecture. They're able to provide that monitoring and diagnostics and proactive maintenance around the equipment that they supply into their customer base.
Great. And Priya, I'm wondering, are you seeing momentum on the connected process side of things, or on the actual connected product side of things in the customer relationships that you have?
Of the value chain. So even customers who have, deployed it in very specific areas are now trying to connect the dots across the entire value chain all the way through to their end product.
Got it. So I think one of the other things that often comes up when I have conversations, because I talk to folks across not just in the manufacturing arena, but also in the other industries, is what are the use cases, the applications that are possible in my industry, and so I think this is an interesting aside because certainly manufacturing is tied in here, and there are many opportunities that can be use IoT solutions, whether it be around supply chain management or geofencing or diagnostics of machines, inventory control. In the manufacturing arena, we see so many opportunities for manufacturers to improve processes in that organization as well as across many different lines of business to really transform the manufacturing processes and activities on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things I think is important is that there's a lot of momentum here. So when we ask manufacturing firms specifically, how much of a priority is this IoT initiatives and these initiatives in your organization in the next year, we find that 45% of manufacturing firms that we survey say this is a critical or very critical strategic priority for our organization. So there is a lot of focus within the manufacturing arena on deploying these different types of IoT solutions. So I've been talking kind of broadly. I think I'd like to turn it over to Priya to talk more specifically about what's really happening with respect to manufacturing environment initiatives that are tied to Internet of Things solutions.
Thanks, Michelle. So AeroScout Industrial has actually been providing, connected asset solutions in the industrial space for many years now. And around 2012, when it was actually acquired by Stanley Black & Decker, the CIO about 6 months ago was actually pushing one of the largest factories in Mexico, in Reynosa. It's about a 500,000 square foot facility that makes a lot of the power tools, or the professional power tools for the Walls brand. Stanley has really embraced the culture of continuous improvement and lean manufacturing. And, the CIO actually encouraged the Reynosa factory to take a look at some of the solutions that AeroScout had actually implemented at many other industrial customers and some of the very compelling ROI with them. So, one of the interesting things that really stood out was, even a very modern, very lean factory, one of the key things that was really missing was the lack of real-time flow of data that gave you, what I call real-time operational intelligence on the factory. So, they have about 50 high-volume production lines. There wasn't a lack of real-time data. And we sat with, the key stakeholders from Reynosa, from manufacturing, IT, some of the operations folks as well. And, we mapped out where they had some challenges today due to the lack of real-time data. And what we identified, we picked a few lines to pilot this on to see what the impact could be. And utilizing the existing Cisco Wi-Fi infrastructure that they had, we implemented a line flow rate monitoring system by connecting to the scales. We call them quality scales that were indications of the quality of the products coming off the line. So by doing this, we were able to provide real-time alerting of quality issues on the line, and as well as a real-time operational intelligence dashboard that was accessible to everyone from the line supervisor all the way to the plant manager. So if we actually do the next slide, we can see what the impact of this real-time information had, which was, we're always amazed by some of the results that we see when they would deploy the number of solutions to many customers, that the power of real-time information, even in a very lean factory. So they saw throughput increase of 10%. The utilization went from 80 to 90% because it's pretty labor intensive, a lot of these lines. And the actual biggest surprise, the pleasant surprise, was the line employees actually felt very empowered because they now had real-time information that was contextualized that they could actually take action on and not have to wait until the end of the shift to see how their line was performing. So we went from connected lines to the connected supervisor, getting a connected service, and ultimately a connected plant. And the intent is to really roll the solution out through the entire factory. But I would say the key takeaway was it was a cross-functional effort at the beginning of the project, sitting with the key stakeholders, and really understanding what the business outcome could be and was expected, and then designing a solution around that to support that. And we were able to actually implement this with zero downtime to the facility, which is really important when it's such a high-volume production, that we were able to implement this without interrupting production.
Great. I think you brought up a really interesting point about it's a cross-functional initiative that this has to be, and I think it's really important that an important part of this discussion, because these different decisions really cut across various functions in the organization. They absolutely transform not just sort of a silo initiative, but they also transform the way that individuals do their jobs on a day-to-day basis. And I think this really represents what we hear as well in terms of that requirement to have at the very early stages of deciding how to approach these IoT solutions, the right people in the room to really have those conversations. So I guess I'd like to ask Chet, I mean, is that a critical piece of the discussions that you have up front with customers as well, in terms of making sure these different lines of business and roles are part of that discussion process?
Yes, indeed. So again, I'll use an example to illustrate that as well. So what we found is that really working with not only the operations folks, with manufacturing, controls and automation, we were up to the VP of manufacturing, into the VP of supply chain, but also over into engineering. So I don't know if you can advance the slides there. But one great example that we have with a company that is a producer of really premium, top-of-the-line refrigeration and stovetop, as well as other types of appliances, was with Sub-Zero Wolf. And they were faced with a very aggressive launch schedule for a portfolio of 60 new products, right? And so given that consideration, now, again, this is a case where with the Sub-Zeros, with refrigerators, you actually had an opportunity, they have a great opportunity for getting more connected products and driving more services and upside revenues for them. But in this case, it's really about implementing that, launching those new products at an existing factory, as well as they had the complication as part of this launch schedule to bring online a greenfield, a new factory, which was thousands of miles, literally thousands of miles away from the engineering center and the headquarters. And so they really needed a means to increase staff productivity within the engineering capabilities and collaboration, and still reduce travel, right? Because travel is time as well as costs. And so they found that they had an opportunity to make use of the unified wireless capability where they upgraded their wireless networks of the existing factory, and as part of the new greenfield, they designed into the network architecture a unified wired and wireless that not only enabled data flows, right, so diagnostic information coming from the equipment, but also over the same service, over the same network service, collaboration and video. So the ability to have visualization around what's going on in the factory. And so from an engineering standpoint, again, as you're collaborating with production and getting new products, in this case 60 new products, as you might imagine, those are staged, so you can't fly engineers all over the country in order to have, or all over the world in many cases for many companies, to have those products introduced in a timely fashion. So they were able to leverage that unified, upgraded wireless networks at the existing factory and with the new factory to have great collaboration between engineering and production. And with another partner of ours, a company called LiberStream, which has a hardened industrial camera that really provides for visual diagnostics around what's going on with great clarity, and a couple of other capabilities where there's the ability to have WebEx integrated into that, so for collaboration. So they really made use of that increased collaboration to reduce travel costs, to reduce cycle time. They estimated they never took on a project where they were looking to launch 60 new products, but by example, for previous product launches, they felt that they were able to shave upwards of 20% off of the NPI cycle. And then consequent to going into production with those new models, they were really able to drive out downtime because you had engineering expertise and even equipment expertise from suppliers who were able to beam in through the same network that was providing data and information around production, diagnostics of what's coming off the equipment, as well as the video stream and collaboration and voice stream that is providing more, again, diagnostic information around what's happening. So they're able to significantly reduce their downtime, save travel, and really fundamentally reduce their field testing costs as well. And again, a key component there in terms of the engagement from the line of business was with engineering in that particular case. Really less so than production. Engineering really drove the use of IoT and a converged IP-based network architecture that enabled that collaboration that they really needed to drive that launch of 60 new products.
Great. Thanks so much, Chet. I think, one of the other things that we often hear about in our conversations here is how important the network infrastructure is in sort of linking the factory floor with the operational requirements of the business. I recognize there's a lot of words on this slide, but the reality is that network infrastructure needs to provide connectivity that's reliable for workers that are located in many different places. It has to enable efficient operations and deal with interference in many of the factory locations. It has to deliver optimal applications and services, often with QoS requirements. And ultimately, there's a need to manage and monitor and proactively understand how the network is doing so that if there is an issue, that you're not jeopardizing mission-critical activities and operations. So I think this network element is underlying a lot of the requirements and enables a lot of the IoT solutions that we've been talking about. And Chet, I think one of the things that you probably hear is that piece in some of the conversations from your customers. Is there, in this sense, do you see a requirement for converging networks? Are there requirements that are unique to the factory environment that drive new requirements in the network side, other than the challenges that are clear in many cases?
Yes, in the example that I provided before with Harley, we had a really strong advocate from the controls engineering, and they really had more of an IT perspective, but what they recognized, Dave Gutschall, was that you really had to get that converged network architecture enabled such that you didn't have a lot of patches that were required from system integration and a lot of a whole variety of services, different, kind of different islands of information and automation that required a lot of integration. What Dave really drove there was you had to streamline that on IP, right, on a common network architecture that was using common technology. So as not to be completely deferential to the discrete side of manufacturing, what I have here is a process example in mining, and similarly, the drivers here from a business standpoint with MD was that they really need to increase the production quality and output without increasing headcount or even resources, right? So production resources. They had a need to improve safety as well as, again, kind of minimize the costs associated with extracting ore from the earth. And so what they found, again, was that this common network architecture between enterprise all the way down through to the devices and people that are utilized within the production environment, in this case it's a mining environment, was that was absolutely necessary. And by deploying a unified Wi-Fi with unified communications and collaboration, as well as a unified compute architecture into their mining operations, they were able to connect the IoT, the Internet of Things, with people, track location of miners, location of vehicles, monitoring vehicle status, diagnostics, so on, and automate a lot of their capabilities such that they really quadrupled production, up to 2 million tons annually in this one mine site. They saved a lot of money, as you see, in terms of being able to access expertise through that unified network, and then they also improved miners' safety because you had easier connections between the information and analysis around, what's happening from sensor information that's being provided along with where people are, and, where the miners are and how to really drive, even evacuation procedures and execution against evacuation when that happens. And so they just fundamentally improved the safety and the numbers associated with what we in the U.S. term as OSHA recordables. So great example of making use of a unified infrastructure to drive a whole bunch of services that are including cost out and safety up for their mining operations.
Great. Thanks so much for those great examples. I think it's interesting that we've been talking about all the positive ways that firms in the manufacturing arena can deploy these IoT solutions. I thought it was interesting from our survey data that there are still some concerns that manufacturers highlight as sort of challenges for them as they try to go and deploy IoT solutions. And on this slide, you see the results of that question, specifically highlighting security as a key concern. And I think in our conversations, these security concerns come from various angles: protecting the infrastructure and the systems from intrusion and hacking, securing the data, ensuring the privacy and the anonymity of the individuals that are accessing the data, ensuring the security of the actual environment, the manufacturing, the factory floor environment. The security certainly is one of multiple issues, and you can see here that these percentages add up to more than 100% because they could select all that apply. So, there's multiple challenges that firms have to sort of step up to and think about as they deploy manufacturing solutions. So I'm wondering, Priya, do you hear security as one of the issues that comes up, or are there other issues that sometimes come up as part of the discussion process as firms think about going down this path?
For us, with a lot of the solutions that we're deploying today, well, security is a concern. A bigger challenge that we have is the availability of, Wi-Fi infrastructure off the carpeted area. So, as shocking as it might seem, there's many, many factories, or even Fortune 100 companies that actually don't have pervasive Wi-Fi infrastructure off the carpeted floor, on the plant floor. So that's definitely, I think, a challenge. The incredible thing is we've actually had, very compelling ROI that justified, even the incremental installation of Wi-Fi infrastructure that was part of the ROI. But I think if that became more pervasive, I think the adoption of this becomes even easier.
Got it. And Chet, how about you in terms of concerns that come up as part of the discussions for these IoT solution deployments?
Yes, so security has a lot of different dimensions around it. I talked a lot around, again, and we've had a great partnership there with AeroScout Industrial on wireless and making use of that, wireless, ubiquitous wireless into the plant side, right, the non-carpeted side of the house. But in terms of security, there is kind of physical security, surveillance, and that has to happen in conjunction with the cybersecurity, right? And cybersecurity concerns have been confounded over the last several years with Duku and those types of worms and security breaches that have occurred within industrial environments that have taken down production, right? So those, in the case of many of those breaches, there was an opportunity to connect what was going on physically through, kind of video analysis with what was being seen from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so the approach with Cisco is we have, kind of a defense in depth. There's multi-tiers and layers of security that we continue to advance and improve upon without impacting performance, right, in terms of the performance of the network and, even all the way down to like a motion control type application where this high performance requirements utilized on the same network that's being utilized for delivering video and other services. This example that's shown here is one where it was really a customer service and it was making use of the physical security that is available through video, and doing that in a way that does take into consideration what's happening from a compute standpoint on the cyber side. But what Mercedes was able to do here was really monitor multiple sites from a single location and really reduce the number of incidents that were going on at the dealership. So the customer for Mercedes here in this case is dealerships. But beyond that, it's again, from the device to the network to the applications up through the overall architecture up into the enterprise. There needs to be layers of security that are vastly enabled when you choose one technology on which to found that, which is the Internet Protocol-based technology for your networking and for all those services that I talked about.
Got it. Well, thanks so much. So I hope that we've been, as we've had this discussion, provided all of you who are listening some insight into IoT deployments in the manufacturing arena and some of the opportunities and even some of the challenges that manufacturers face. We do have some time for audience questions, so if you haven't already, please submit your questions by putting them into the appropriate chat box, and I will start the question and answers now. When Priya was presenting her session, there was a question that came up about the Black & Decker example, and the question is, how did Black & Decker get started when they put together their IoT factory solution? What is the starting point?
I think one of the first things that we actually did was we sat down, the AeroScout Industrial team sat down with the key stakeholders from the factory. And we talked through what their current challenges were in terms of, some of it sometimes, they would feel that there's a problem here, that there's more opportunity for improvement, but they were unable to measure it. So I think it's really important at the beginning of the project to understand what your business outcome is going to be, or your expected business outcome. Because if you can't quantify it, or you're not going to be able to measure it. And then making sure we have the key stakeholders. So the analogy that I use is you might have a vision to build the Empire State Building, but you need to have a plan to build the first floor. And that's really what we did. So while we looked at what was really possible over the long term if most of the assets were connected in the factory, we wanted to start out with a project that really had a significant business outcome. So that it was just more than, hand-waving or a lot of rhetoric. So, and that was really key, and we needed buy-in from stakeholders across all the functions, because otherwise you couldn't really contextualize the data the correct way, and you couldn't give visibility to a plant manager that they really required on the dashboard. So I would say getting all the stakeholders together in a room, understanding what your expected business outcome is, and then really working on the solution design to support that.
Thank you so much. And that actually gets to one of the other questions that just came in with respect to the business case development for IoT solutions. And the question is, what is the role of ROI cases and business case development to really facilitate these deployments? I guess, Chet, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think as part of the examples that I provided, they've been very focused on business outcomes, right, and driving fundamentally cost out, revenues up, or risks mitigated and managed in unique ways that make use of IoT and the analytics, the awareness around IoT, the analytics, and then taking action against those analysis. But going into that, it's in many cases it is a bit of a leap of faith, and some of it has to do with, in the case of the work that we've done with Cisco, has largely been alongside our partners who have kind of a trusted a trusted advisor role within the line of business operations at our joint customers. So in the case of the Harley-Davidson example, we were hand in hand with Rockwell Automation as an example. In the case of the Stanley Black & Decker that Priya has talked about, we were hand in hand with AeroScout Industrial. In the case of Sub-Zero, similar with LibraStream. So part of it in terms of the ROI of business case development is having someone who, an industrial automation player, someone who's been in this business, particularly from Cisco's perspective. Cisco is perceived as primarily an IT company. We do have a lot to offer on the line of business side. So having that partner alongside us is important. And one example of where we really went in with strong analytics around what we believed, along with our partner, in this case it was Rockwell Automation as well, is with General Motors. And what GM was looking to do was really accelerate their entry into emerging markets, and specifically that was Brazil and China. So this dates back, almost a decade, right, in terms of their interest in expanding into emerging markets. And what GM determined, in order to drive that, they had to standardize, and they recognized that the network, in conjunction with the plant floor control systems, was a key element. They weren't sure exactly how, but they knew that was going to be there. So in working with them, we were able to identify what types of savings opportunities and accelerated kind of time reduction opportunities that might be available to them by working through a standard architecture that they could deploy and make use of within these emerging markets, such that they also had remote connectivity with those new plants back to Detroit, where there's a lot of expertise and the ability to really reduce cycles and mean time to repair and so on. And so they did create a globally integrated, standardized platform that was used for both engineering and production, so kind of digital manufacturing, if you will, in terms of preparing the plans for the new plants, as well as consequently in operation. So they deployed that standards-based network architecture, what they refer to as the plant floor controls network, PFC. And our numbers did bear out. Actually, they were an improvement because we're many years later, and we had the opportunity to assess what the real savings were. And what GM has found is that they saved $53 million in network operations staff because they had a standardized approach and they could automate a lot of the network functions. They were able to improve on uptime with the network and with their controls networks, the automation equipment, such that they feel like they've profited by upwards of $76 million in terms of improved uptime. They've reduced spares. They have, like I say, significantly reduced the downtime at those greenfield assembly plants and improved product quality alongside that, because again, they have more insights, they have the ability to capture information and analyze it quickly. So they found that they have north of 150% ROI, so in fact 166% ROI over a 5-year period, and So that there is a return. What we've seen by other studies is that those plants who are advanced in their converged architecture are really enabling good operating profit numbers and return on assets and asset utilization and so on.
Those are amazingly great examples in terms of really the power of these solutions to really transform businesses in very tangible ways. So I really appreciate the time. One from my co-presenters today, Chet and Priya, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to facilitate this discussion, and I want to thank everybody for attending this session as well. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Michelle. This is Frank with Cisco IoT Products and Solutions Marketing. I'd like to thank our session moderator, Michelle, as well as our panelists, Priya and Chet, for today's lively and informative discussion. This online event is part of Cisco's IoT in Action series, intended to bring you the most current information on IoT market adoption, trends, and technology advancements, focusing on real-world examples of IoT implementation. For next quarter's online event, please look for an email invitation from us or visit us at www.cisco.com/show/IoT for today's recording and previous online events. Thank you for joining us.